Welcome. This week's Parshas Vayeshev. Divrei Torah should be Refuah Shlema, Noam, Avraham, Ben Atar, Shlamid, Brindel, Yuta, Bas Tzivia, and Mordechai, and Ben Sarah. Should be a chus for my family and all of Klal Yisrael. So the Maggid, Rav Yaakov Galinsky, tells a wonderful story about his mother, Mrs. Devorah Galinsky, that teaches a lesson in our Parsha. So this is brought down in the Lahagid series. In Poland, Mrs. Devorah Galinsky was entrusted with reading the Das Yiddische Tagblatt. It was a newspaper that was associated with Agudas Yisrael at the time. And in those days, most women could speak and read the Lashon HaKodesh, but regarding Polish, they were able to speak it, but they were not able to read it. So, hungry for the news, the women in her community would gather together at the home of Devorah, who actually knew how to read Polish, knew how to read the newspaper, and would update the women from the paper about the news of the day. So one day, while Devorah was peeling potatoes in the kitchen, her neighbor comes by a little bit earlier to the daily reading of the newspaper. And she sees, the newspaper had arrived. In those days, the newspaper wouldn't arrive until later in the afternoon. So she picks up the newspaper, starts looking at it, and all of a sudden, she says, "A ship has sunk in the ocean. How could you be standing there peeling potatoes?" So confused, Devorah walks over to her friend and sees what had occurred. The newspaper was being held upside down, and the neighbor, seeing the image of the ship, assumed it had sunk. So Devorah corrected her, saying, "What is this? That's how you read the newspaper? Look again, turn it around. It says here that they're building a new ship, not that one has sunk." And so this humorous story teaches us a profound lesson. Sometimes we may be looking at situations entirely backwards. So when we read about the lives of the Avos, it's easy to understand the stories on the surface level. But if we really read them, we can see a deeper lesson. Let's take a look at Yosef as an example. He endured countless challenges. He was thrown into a pit by his brothers. He was sold as a slave. He was falsely accused. He was imprisoned and forgotten. Yet he remained resilient and steadfast. How did he endure so much suffering? How did he endure everything that had occurred to him? So Yosef recognized Ki Hashem imo, that Hashem was always with him. And this is the deeper lesson in the story of Yosef. He lived by the principle, Kol ma da'avid rachmana letav avid. Everything Hashem does is ultimately for the best. With this unwavering faith, Yosef turned his troubles into blessings. This perspective teaches us that sometimes we may be reading our lives upside down and maybe recognizing that even challenges may turn into opportunities. The Torah tells us that Yosef's brothers saw that Yaakov loved Yosef more than them, and because of this, Lo yachlu dabru l'shalom. They could not speak to him in peace. So the Gra in Kol Eliyahu connects this to the Gemara in Brachos. The Gemara explains that when one leaves a friend, they should say Lech L'Shalom, go to peace, rather than Lech B'Shalom, go in peace. So the Gemara explains that when Yisro said to Moshe, Lech L'Shalom, with a lamed, Moshe ascended spiritually and was successful. However, when David said to Avshalom, Lech B'Shalom, Avshalom met a tragic end. So now, if you look back at the pasuk, it's very meduyak, it's very specific in what it says. The brothers harbored jealousy and resentment toward Yosef, and therefore were unable to say to him, Lech L'Shalom, the goodbye of blessing. words of blessing. And that's what the Torah says, Lo yachlu dabru L'Shalom, hinting to the above Gemara. In this week's Parsha, Yosef is sent by his father Yaakov to the fields to see how his brothers are doing with the flock. And he gets lost on the way and meets an Ish. Who is, or what is this Ish? So, Rav Yitzchak bar Yosef, who is a Talmud of the Rashba, brought to print by my cousin, Rav Zechariah Holzer, explains that the Ish mentioned in the Pasuk was actually 3 malachim. However, Yosef himself thought it was only one person. He was unaware that there were 3 malachim. So Rav David Holzer, my uncle in Vayeshev David, which is he has a parish on this beautiful Rishon, asks a question: why was it necessary to send 3 malachim if Yosef only saw them as one? Wouldn't a single malach have sufficed? So the answer lies in the principle that each malach can only fulfill one mission, one shlichus. This concept explains the sequence of events described in the pasuk. So my uncle, Rav David, elaborates further, showing how each part of the pasuk corresponds to a distinct mission. Eyu ish. The first mission, the first malach's purpose was to find Yosef and accompany him when he had lost his way. When a person is lost, encountering someone else can bring comfort and a sense of security, knowing they are not alone. V'yishaleu ha'ish. The second mission, the second malach's purpose was to ask Yosef, how are you doing? Chazal emphasized the importance of greeting others warmly. In fact, one is even permitted in certain circumstances to interrupt Birkas Kriyat Shema to say hello to someone. When someone greets you warmly, it demonstrates that they value and they care for you, providing a sense of validation, emotional uplift, and even revitalizing one's spirit. And finally, V'yomer ha'ish nas'u mizeh. The third mission, the final malach's purpose, was to hint to Yosef that he was now obligated to experience exile, mischayev begalus, because he had distanced himself from his brothers. This served as both a warning and a foreshadowing of Yosef's future. So we see this multi-layered mission required 3 malachim. We can take away from these 3 malachim also beautiful insights into just how simply being present when someone is lost or alone, to a warm greeting can uplift a person and make someone's day. And finally, the subtle message of the malach also foreshadowing and hinting to what the challenges that Yosef is about to experience. Yosef's brothers wanted to kill him, but Reuven said, no, hold on, throw him into a pit and let him rot there. His real intention was that he was going to come back later, pick up Yosef, and bring him back home. So Rav Baruch Simon discusses in his Sefer, Imrei Baruch, what was Reuven's motivation to save his brother? So based on the Medrash and Bereshis Rabbah, there are 2 motivations that are given. 1, Reuven was the Bechor, he was the oldest. It was his responsibility for his other brothers. If anything would have happened to Yosef, if any disaster would have befell him, Reuven would be the one to answer the questions. It would fall on him. And thus this sense of duty drove him to act. The second is due to gratitude. What gratitude? Yosef had a dream, and that dream showed that Reuven was still included in the Shvatim. After the incident with Bilhah, where Reuven moved his father's bed from Bilhah's tent to his mother's, Leah's, tent, an action viewed as disrespectful, Reuven feared maybe he was not going to be included in the Shiftei Ka, in the Shvatim. So when Reuven heard Yosef's dream that there were 11 stars bowing, he realized, I'm still part of the Shvatim. He had some relief. And for that, he was gratitude. So Rav Simon explains from Rav Chaim Shmulevitz, look at the depth of gratitude that Reuven had. Yosef's dream was for Yosef's benefit, not for Reuven. Yet Reuven saw an incidental, a secondary benefit, a secondary view of the dream that allowed him that allowed him to see gratitude, to see good, to see that he's still part of the Shvatim. And even so, even this indirect good of the dream obligated Reuven an hakaras hatov to his brother Yosef. And thus we see the powerful lesson that even when only part of something is good, and maybe something that's good but not directly good to you, but indirectly good to you, it still requires a hakaras hatov, it still requires a thank you, it still requires a gratitude. And this is the hakaras hatov, the gratitude of Reuven, that we should all try to see even the incidental good and be grateful for those things as well. We have many dreams in this week's Parsha. The Minchas Asher in his Sefer brings various cases where Rishonim have dreams, and those dreams have an influence in the Psak Halacha. One example is given by tefillin. There are two types of tefillin. There's Rashi and Rabbeinu Tam. Standard, most of us wear Rashi tefillin, and there are some Hasidim that also put on Rabbeinu Tam tefillin. What happens if someone has Rabbeinu Tam tefillin and they want to convert it to Rashi tefillin? Is one allowed to do so? So the Radvaz in his Shailas Tshuvos initially doesn't think there's any issue with this. He thinks it's permissible. But then he has a dream. And in the dream, it was revealed to him that this ruling was incorrect and contradicted opinions of many Gedolim who held that it was actually forbidden. So the Radvaz afterwards looks into the topic even further and concludes that indeed the correct halacha is that this would not be permissible. The second example from the Or Zarua. The Or Zarua was uncertain how to spell his name, Akiva. Should it end with a hey or with an aleph? So in a dream, the verse appeared to him, Or Zarua la tzadik v'shaylei simcha. Reish Ayin Kuf Yod Beis Hey. The last letters of that pasuk spell out Rebbe Akiva with a hey. And so based on this dream showing the Or Zarua that Akiva is spelled with a hey, he named his Sefer Or Zarua. This decision is actually brought down the halacha in regards to Gittin, that Akiva in a get should be spelled with a hey. The Smag and the 613 mitzvos. So the Smag, a Sefer Mitzvos, a gadol, a work detailing the 613 mitzvos, wrote that after completing his Sefer, he saw in a dream that he had made a mistake. He had omitted the mitzvah of Hishama lecha pen tishkach es Hashem Elokecha. Beware lest you forget Hashem your God, as one of the lavin, the negative commandments. Based on this dream, he wrote in his introduction that he forgot one of these lavin. So these three examples demonstrate how dreams impacted Rishonim, and there are many more examples that the Minchas Asher brings. These are just a sampling. And we see how it can but at least have an influence in Halacha. This help have an influence on the spelling of names, which influence Gittin, and have, clarifications in enumerating the minyan hamitzvos. But what made these Rishonim so extraordinary was their constant immersion in Torah study. Their minds were so filled with Torah that even in their dreams, they were engaged in limud, in study, and chidushim, innovative insights. This profound connection to Torah allowed them to achieve clarity and growth even during moments of rest. Shabbat Shalom. Have a good Shabbos.